Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you again so much for joining us on the Saturday afternoon here. My name is Brooke Brower, and I'm the WSU San Juan County Extension Director. I welcome you to today's event, Local Solidarity Economy, Farming Co-ops, and Domestic Fair Trade. I'll be one of your hosts for today's event. Before we begin, I'd just like to briefly share a land and labor acknowledgement that our group has put together as part of the Agricultural Summit. We recognize and honor all peoples who have ancestral ties to these lands and waters. We recognize and honor all our ancestors and all those living who have contributed their labor, experience, and knowledge to growing food and nourishing communities. It is our hope that the summit, including this event, can offer a next step in building relationships, educating, and creating space for voices of Black, Indigenous, and people of color that have been silenced, marginalized, and excluded from local and larger food and agriculture conversations. And with great gratitude, we welcome our panelists who will be sharing their knowledge, experience, and wisdom with us today. Also like to take a moment to thank our wonderful sponsors for helping make this event possible, as well as the many partner organizations. Our sponsors include Land Bank, Oak Knoll Farm, Skagit Farmers Supply, Taproot Farm, Sunset Builders, Peter Smith Construction, Orcas Food Co-op, San Juan Islands Makers Guild, Friday Harbor Film Fest, Islanders Insurance, Orca Song, Lopez Locavores, and Rural Roots. Another thing, just as a quick reminder, everybody's getting pretty good at this by now, but to go over the Zoom tips, just please keep yourself on mute. This session is going to be recorded, so you will have access to it later. And that reminds me, Kate, have you started recording? Great, thank you. And then please hold on to your questions unless the facilitator or speaker invites those questions. And then at the end of the event, we'll have time for Q&A, and you can enter your questions into the chat. And also, please take a moment to fill out an evaluation. You'll be receiving that at the end of the session, and that's very, very important for our future planning and understanding how we're impacting our communities. So with that, the other thing I'd just like to remind us of is our community commitments that we co-developed. So please take this time to actively listen. All right, I'm having a hard time seeing my screen. And honor the experience that others have lived. And we will create space that allows for learning and growth. A reminder that if you're someone who speaks easily, move into a listening role. And if you're someone who listens easily, I encourage you to move up into a speaking or asking role. We have grace with each other and acknowledge that sometimes we make mistakes and commit to change. And with that, it's my honor to hand it off to Lerner Limbach, who's going to be our facilitator for today's panel. He's the general manager and co-founder of the Orcas Food Co-op. He's a fourth generation cooperator. I guess he's still cooperating, and currently pursuing a master's degree in cooperative management. A 20-year resident of Orcas Island, Lerner has also served as Agricultural Resource Committee of San Juan County since 2013, as well as chair of that committee for 5 of those years. So with that, thank you again for joining us, and I'm going to hand it over to you, Lerner.
Thank you, Brooke, and for all the organizers that made this possible. I have been eagerly awaiting this panel because it's pretty much my favorite topic, and just wanted to share that in preparation for this panel, just the learning that I've done has already impacted me, and I'm very excited for what we have in store today. The title of the panel is Local Solidarity Economy, Farming Co-ops, and Domestic Fair Trade. And we are joined by local food sovereignty leaders, Rosalinda Guillen from Community to Community Development, and Ramon Torres, worker owner of Cooperativa Tierra y Libertad, We're also joined by Elizabeth Henderson from the Agricultural Justice Project, who will give an overview of their current joint work building a fair and equitable future of agriculture here in Northwest Washington. This discussion will focus on the possibilities of how we can work together to transition away from an agricultural system that relies on the exploitation of labor to build a community-based food system within a solidarity economy, and how small family farms are essential partners in this effort. So we're going to have about 15 minutes with each speaker. We're going to start with Elizabeth, followed by Rosalinda, and then Ramon. And then we'll have about a half an hour for questions. We also put the link to longer bios in the chat. And we just wanted to encourage people to check that out as well, rather than me giving the lengthy bios, because these presenters all have very, very extensive and impressive backgrounds. So with that, I'd like to start. Elizabeth, are you ready to go?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. I wish I could be there with you, but on the other hand, here in Rochester, New York, on unceded Seneca territory, we are enjoying weather that's 25 degrees above normal. It's 80 degrees here today. Around the world, family-scale farms are rapidly disappearing, unable to compete with transnational corporations that have taken power over global supply chains and the food policies of national governments. Corporations like Cargill, Tyson, Walmart, and lots of others have extracted billions of dollars from farmers and farm workers. By eliminating the fair pricing with supply management that was instituted during the New Deal in the 1930s, governmental and international policies have had an overall effect of driving down the prices paid to farmers and driving up the prices paid by the people who must purchase food. So this is based on studies that have been done by farmer Brad Wilson over many, many years, where he keeps track of the blue, which is what farmers get from the marketplace, and then red, which are the subsidies. And as you can see, the subsidies were small during the war period and immediately after, and the subsidies have gotten much larger, but the price from the marketplace has gotten smaller. And that difference is what goes to line the pockets of the Waltons and the Bezos and the big corporations. So despite growing populations, the quantity of food that's being produced worldwide is still adequate to feed everyone on the planet. But the inequities of power, wealth, and access to land are causing hunger to spread. And the COVID-19 pandemic is only making the inequities worse. The increasingly consolidated production and trade of food have led to ecological devastation and social desperation in agriculture communities in many places. As fundamental as the economic issues are the cultural implications of the current industrial food system, which separates those of us who eat from the source of our food. This system is alienating. Food becomes a commodity. Plant varieties become genetic property. Farmers become producers. Farm workers become wage laborers. And members of communities are converted into individual consumers, while market forces manipulate all of these elements for maximum profit by agribusiness. Communities have lost contact with the growers of their food and the soil that the food comes from. Farmers and farm workers may still work closely together, but the current model compels farmers to view their workers as one of many economic resources on the farm, inputs. Meanwhile, the farmers themselves, we're losing our rights to save and share seeds and make the managerial decisions over our own farms. I've been an active participant in the movement to create an alternative to this industrialized system since the 1970s. And our vision is expressed in the principles of organic agriculture. And it's based on the values of a solidarity economy. So these values, love of nature and humility about the role of humans. The health of the soil is key to plant, human, and animal health. The way we choose to live demands peace, justice, and an end to racism, an end to white supremacy. Everything is interconnected. Resilience depends on diversity of plants, of people, of cultures, and cooperation beats competition. And not only what we do, but that we do it with love and compassion is essential. And throw in some joy as well. In 1979, I chose to move to a farm seeking a safe, healthy place to raise my son, where I could grow food that I knew was free from all the additives that I was worrying about. I was a refugee from traffic jams, parking garages where women were robbed and raped, toxic spills that spread poisonous fumes through the neighborhood where my child went to school. Within a few years at Unadilla Farm in Gill, Massachusetts, my farm partners and I were covering farm expenses through produce sales. Those expenses did not yet include wages for me, the main farm worker, or health insurance. At that time, I was able to get Social Security as a widow. But homesteading did not require a lot of cash. We had the time to do things for ourselves. We ate well, mostly food we grew, or sometimes bartered with farm friends. And we shopped at the food co-op, and if they didn't have it, we didn't eat it. We heated our house, which was constructed to maximize solar gain. And we used firewood that we cut on the farm and made a solar water heater in the greenhouse. I learned a lot about how to live lightly on the planet from Juanita and Wally Nelson, who are tax resistors, market gardeners, and leaders in creating local markets for locally grown food. And keep an eye out, there will be a collection of Juanita Nelson's writings appearing very soon. The first few years of farming, I tried out every kind of market that I could find. I sold to grocery chains and some independent grocery stores near Greenfield, Massachusetts. I sold to restaurants, I sold to farmers markets. I learned valuable lessons from every kind of sale. And working on a farm and homesteading as much as possible was a really satisfying way to live. But you should not have to take vows of poverty to become a farmer. It was acting on that conviction that led me to seek alternative models of farming and to become involved in agricultural policy. In the mid-'80s, I did a lot of reading on how to organize a farm that was ecological in practices, but also financially successful. During my lifetime, this country has lost close to 3 million farms, and the system of farm labor based on slavery has dominated on the ever larger industrial scale fruit and vegetable farms. So during this ongoing farm crisis, when so many farms were going out of business, I went to NOFA, the Northeast Organic Farming Association conferences, and I met Robin Van In, and I learned about community-supported agriculture, where a farm puts together a collection of what they grow, and people become members of the farm and get shares every week. It's a model that shifts the financial burden from the fragile shoulders of the farmer all alone to building a community around the farm. And down in the South at this time, Booker T. Whatley was teaching a very similar model, a subscription you-pick farm. But CSA goes one step farther than Whatley's model by asking the members to share the risks with the farmer. When crops are abundant, members get more. When bad conditions reduce crops, members get less for the same amount of money. So when I moved back to my home state in New York, and my farm partner and I agreed to run our operation as a commercial enterprise and make our certified organic farm our main source of income, we did a CSA. And our members helped us do the farm work and do all the administrative tasks involved in making a CSA run. Back when I'd been in Massachusetts, the Northeast Organic Farming Association started a chapter there, and we also started organic certification. So NOFA is a federation of state-based organizations, and I helped start the one in Massachusetts, and then I became very active with the one in New York State. We were one of several state-based organic certification programs all around the country that started doing certification. This was before the 1990 Farm Bill authorized the National Organic Program, and that took 12 years to get started. So all this time, organic certification was being done in the private sector, and most of it by organic farming organizations ourselves. And all of us based our certification programs on the basic organic standards of IFOAM. It's not a toothpaste. It's the International Federation of Organic Agriculture Movements, which has members all over the world in over 100 countries. And then we took those basic standards and we modified them to meet local standards. But I can tell you that most of the organic farmers in the world are people of color. They're Africans, they're Asians, they are people from India. The minority is the Europeans and the white Americans to the organic farmers. And the basic standards of organic agriculture are based on the indigenous practices of those peoples all around the world. But to create our standards in Massachusetts, we set up a very participatory process. We had meetings all around the state where dozens of people discussed what should be included. And the meetings went on for hours and were often very contentious and heated. Consumers wanted no botanical pesticides. Farmers said, we need a few until we learn more, until we learn to do without them. Most of those farmers who participated and started organic certification were direct sales farmers. We cut out the middleman, which is what Booker T. Whatley told. But the low prices set by global food markets and the concern to not only sell to the wealthy set limits on how much premium a direct sales farm could charge. And it meant that we never could afford to hire enough workers to keep everyone's workday at 8 hours. So all this time, we've been losing farms and we've been losing acreage in farms, and the farms that continue to exist are getting larger. And I'll be happy to share these slides with all of you. And the greatest loss of farmland has been by Black farmers and other farmers of color. So when the first regulations of the National Organic Program were published, I was a member of the Organic Committee of the National Campaign for Sustainable Agriculture. And along with representatives of other farming and also farm worker groups, we submitted comments saying that the National Organic Program was leaving out the people in organic agriculture, the farmers and farm workers who were making agriculture the alternative to the industrial scale farms that we didn't want to imitate. And USDA answered us, this is not in our purview. So several of us organizations, the Comité de Apoyo a los Trabajadores Agrícolas, CATA, which is based in New Jersey, and Rural Advancement Foundation International USA, which is based in North Carolina, and I represented NOFA, and there was Marty Mesh from the Florida Organic Growers, and we even had a man representing Fundación Renace from Bolivia. We got together and we created Food Justice Certification and the Agricultural Justice Project. The National Organic Program was taking into consideration animals, but leaving out the people in farming. And this represented a huge gap, since social justice has historically been one of the basic principles of organic agriculture. So the Agricultural Justice Project set out to establish a label for products that came from businesses with excellent labor, trade, and environmental stewardship practices. The goal was to create a label that would set a high bar and reward those with good intentions and bring increased public awareness to social justice issues in agriculture, and to begin to make the social change in the food system and to codify in concrete terms what making a legitimate claim of social justice means. So we were trying to establish domestic fair trade. The partners in AJP knew that such a claim would need to be backed up by strong standards and a rigorous verification system. So we set up a stakeholder-driven process with people like Rosalinda on our standards committee and on our advisory council. In recent years, the USDA organic label has been in trouble from reports of fraud, from agribusiness pressures, and from the National Organic Program's failure to enforce the standards with rigor. Conventional corporations have bought up organic brands and taken over the Organic Trade Association. Entrepreneurs for whom profit is more important than being true to the principles of organic agriculture have figured out how to use loopholes in the National Organic Program regulations. And as a result, mega dairies and hydroponic vegetable operations are underselling real organic farms. But even a farm that meets the minimum national organic standards is using less energy and fewer toxic materials than conventional farms. So while the verbal contracts that are the rule for produce are not characterized by the kind of blatant unfairness in the contracts of the big meat processors that they force on chicken, pork, and beef farmers, nevertheless, there's little room for negotiation and the recognition of the farmers' freedom to associate with other farmers to bargain for a better deal, which is what is demanded by domestic fair trade. As far as the terms of buying and selling go, trade in organic products is all too conventional. And while organic dairy farms receive a higher price than conventional dairy farmers, the organic dairy farmer's share of the final food dollar is lower than the conventional dairy farmer's share. So more than ever, farmers and farm workers and those who eat our food need an alternative based on these principles, on standards like these of the Agricultural Justice Project. We need to allow everyone involved in organic and sustainable production and processing a quality of life that meets their basic needs and allows an adequate return and satisfaction from our basic work, including a safe working environment. We need to progress towards an entire production, processing, and distribution chain, which is both socially just and ecologically responsible. All workers have the right to safe working conditions, just treatment, and fair compensation, and all people have the right to clean, healthy, locally grown food. Farmers need a pricing system that brings payment from the marketplace that covers their cost of production. Parity with supply management. Farms that grow fruit and vegetables, what the Farm Bill language calls specialty crops, need parity pricing and supply management just as much as grain and dairy farms. Farmers complain that they can't find enough good workers. But if we raised wages to livable levels, paying time and a half for overtime, and providing a decent package of benefits, health insurance, a day of rest, paid sick and family leave, unemployment insurance, workers' compensation, and retirement funds, it would do wonders for attracting and retaining workers on our farms. Farmers and farm workers need freedom of association so that we can form groups and unions to negotiate fair pay and working conditions. If the farms were guaranteed prices that covered our production costs, including these higher wages and all these benefits, as well as living wages for us farmers as well, farm work would become the respected and desirable vocation that it deserves to be, especially considering the importance of farm products to human existence and the pleasures of working closely in nature. So we need agrarian justice and solidarity economics. Today, more than ever, we need to build alternatives to the rotting global supply chain where profits for a few take priority over the needs and rights of the many. We need agrarian justice and solidarity economics, and the best place to start is right here in San Juan County, Washington, and in Whatcom County, Washington, and where I live in Wayne County and Monroe County, New York. We can end oversupply, we can end food waste, we can have farmer-owned processing and farms, year-round work that will reconstruct rural communities with living wage jobs for everybody, with local processing plants, food services, restaurants, access for everybody to healthy, locally grown, fresh, culturally appropriate food, and community control through cooperatives and faith-based initiatives and community organizations. So thank you for your good attention.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And Rosalinda, we're gonna roll right into you. And we're a little bit behind. If it's possible to do yours in 12 or 13 minutes, that's great.
I will try. All right, thank you very much. That was wonderful, Elizabeth. Thank you. I am going to move from Elizabeth's presentation to the perspective of the farm workers on the same subject. And I wanted to say that being a member of the Standards Committee and Advisory Committee for the Agricultural Justice Project taught me a lot. It taught me a lot because I learned that there was a way that we could work with small family farmers in understanding why we need to work together to improve working conditions and wages, and what it takes in the economics of building such a partnership for the developing the gold standard of the Agricultural Justice Project. So that was a learning experience, but within that was before I actually got more focused in the idea of what a solidarity economy is and what it looks like in relationship to our community as farm workers, as labor for industrial agriculture. So I have shared a report that will hopefully go out to all the participants, but let me just say that the idea of developing a solidarity economy started way back in the 1980s. And it started in the Southern Hemisphere in South America with organizations and other groups really looking at food production. It moved into, you know, the development of organizations and an international network supporting the development of and the concepts of solidarity economy. In the South, we first heard about it as the La Economía Solidaria. And also during my understanding of who I was as a farm worker and what the agricultural industry really was and where our role as farm workers was within this agricultural industry, which was a very heartbreaking experience for me to learn that agriculture was founded on slavery, that farm workers are actually an expandable workforce more than an equitable partner in the production of food. And I learned this through intense reading and understanding about the formation of the Mondragon cooperatives development movement in Spain, and how those cooperative movements developed in Spain in building a solidarity economy within that corporation. Flash forward to la economía solidaria, or la red de economía solidaria del sur, or the solidarity economy network in the south, and the development of that Latin American solidarity network and participating in it as community to community. But from 1998, when that Latin American Solidarity Economy Network was formed, moved forward to the World Social Forum in 2001, which took place at the same time as the World Economic Forum. And I think that that's where the forces of peasant groups, organizations and associations, and other academics and other folks, economists from around the world came together to have this dialogue. At the same time that Elizabeth was talking about in the United States, this whole movement of really trying to understand and have equity in the production of food in the United States. And this is where we come together in understanding what a solidarity economy is. And it's been many years of dialogue, study, and intersecting of our farm worker leaders, along with the leaders in the Agricultural Justice Project, the U.S. Food Sovereignty Alliance, the Grassroots Global Justice, many of us looking to see how do we address the ravages and the exploitation of capitalism, and especially as farm workers. As an organization, we at Community to Community have really focused in on creating those structural changes. And for us, the solidarity economy is based on values and principles. Elizabeth went through some of those that they were also developing in their formation of farmers coming together. And what struck me in learning about the Agricultural Justice Project was their inclusion of farm workers and labor within that concept, which is exactly where from the South that was coming from labor, and also from protecting Mother Earth and stewardship of food producing land. So for us as an organization, when we were founded in 2003, the strategic goal, long-term, was in educating farm workers in our community on a solidarity economy, in our allies and supporters, and then looking at our local area, governance and other ways that agriculture, sustainable agriculture, and farm workers intersected in an economic structure at the local level. So the solidarity economy has some very critical values that Elizabeth already touched on. We're talking about social and economic democracy, that whole idea of sovereignty and food sovereignty, the idea of cooperation and shared power, not of the few getting all the profit instead of in the many working for that profit that go to the few, but the cooperation and shared power within the production of food. Equity and justice in all dimensions. That's where you're looking at racial justice and gender justice, and the idea that every human that eats and produces food and participates in an economy has equity within that system. In democratic participation, the processes that give us the ability to make decisions within large groups. Sustainability, which is the whole idea of protecting Mother Earth, but also how we produce food, how we package it, how we move it, how we develop, the end product of an agricultural or a food product. How does that look like? Ensuring that we're not damaging the air, the water, and the soil. That we do understand that everything that we do is going to have an effect on our world around us, on Mother Earth. So is what we'd like to say, everything that we do in the production of food is going to impact Mother Earth in a good way or a bad way. And in a solidarity economy, that is important to look at. That also includes the structures around us, the built the built structure around us in every way, buildings and roads and everything around us. And also the pluralism and organic approach, or the replacing this whole concept of one size fits all approach with food and other ways of producing food, that this is the model of producing a certain product, that this is the model of, a certain food that everybody gets to eat. I mean, the one thing that really always strikes me about this is the most obvious one is the so-called food pyramid. When you look at the food pyramid over the years, it changes not based on really not based on what people need, but on what the economy needs, the capitalist economy. For example, what struck me a few years back was how all of a sudden the food pyramid began demanding that people eat more fish. At the same time, that fish farming was a profitable venture that was growing all across the world, shrimp and fish and seafood. The food pyramid changes based on how the global economy is looking to make profit on food. The other most obvious component of pluralism and organic approach is the labeling schemes, the mechanisms that go to eaters to decide what is the food that I should eat and what does that food, what does the label say, that it's organic, that it's socially just. And that has created a glut of labels, in our opinion, about what consumers need to look at to see whether they want to purchase that product or not. And so there's like all of these local and national and international governing mechanisms that are part of a solidarity economy. But for farm workers and for our organization, understanding this big movement of people that we're working with in solidarity all over the world and on a national level, and bringing it home to what are we doing here? What are we doing in Skagit County, Whatcom, and in San Juan County, and those relations that we have with other humans and other organizations and the land at the local level. And I think that for community to community, doing the work on the ground or with our people in switching our thought from the capitalist mentality that what we are is a worker that fits into this industrial food production system, and that the best that we can ask for is a better wage, and protecting ourselves from pesticides, protecting ourselves from exhaustion, from too many hours working in a harsh food production environment, which in my opinion, as farm worker leaders, those are defensive mechanisms that are just survival mechanisms for us to not die. And I think that the pandemic has really shown us that it's literally about that. We're like a tool of the agricultural, industrial, corporate agricultural system that needs to stay alive so that their profits can continue growing. In the meantime, the well-being of our communities and our families is not getting any better. And the struggle to just stay alive is getting more and more difficult to sustain. But before even the pandemic, we were already feeling additional pressure on farm workers in this industrial corporate agricultural industry from climate change, from the ravages of the changes of droughts and storms and climate change itself, that it's requiring more and more additional chemicals and harder work to keep the agricultural production, maintain it at the level that it was before climate change hit, not because the food is needed in the world, but because the profits need to be kept up in the way that they were before. And I think it's been proven over and over in report after report that there is enough food for everybody in the world. It's not about that. It's about who actually has access to it and who decides what kind of food we eat and what kind of food should be shipped and traded. It's more about trade and profit making really than the food system and what people need to eat. When we look at the solidarity economy in our organization, we're looking at sovereignty. Sovereignty for consumers, sovereignty for workers, but also eaters. That we should be able to have the food that we need. We need the access to that food, the kind of food we want to eat, how we want to eat it, But more importantly, we also take into account Mother Earth herself and the place that we're rooted in. And what are we doing in the production of food products that are not native to the land that we're in, where we're forcing the land to produce a plant or a product that nature just can't sustain. Therefore, we have to add other elements into it to keep that food production. So as farm workers in this part of Washington state and the country, I want to say that I want to thank you all for inviting us, because we have a place at the decision-making table and at the thought table of solutions that are going to improve our families, our community, at the same time that they will improve the food system at the local level. So I want to tell you all that's listening that for us, especially from the learnings that we have gained from the World Social Forum and the landless people in Brazil who have reached a level of a solidarity economy model and participatory democracy, that it is possible to do this. And I think Elizabeth mentioned that, and I want to second it. If there's a will, there's a way for us to work together to figure out at the local level that in our counties, there will be no farm worker exploitation, that there will be fairness and justice, because we'll be working with you to fight the corporations that are forcing a model, a one-fits-all model into food production, and that doesn't take into account the indigenous peoples that live here and the protection of the land. And one of the ways that we are looking to really show this example is one of the key tenets of a solidarity economy, the worker ownership of production of food products. And we have, for years, starting in 2007, we have been developing farm worker-owned cooperatives that actually produce the very product themselves that they're working for other farmers to do. And so we're very fortunate today to be able to have a farm worker owner speak about one of these projects in a co-op that is doing really well today. But I want to also just say that the vision that we have locally for food production and for farm workers to coexist with all of you is a sustainable family farming system that takes into account all of these values and principles of a solidarity economy. Because I think, if nothing else, what we learned from the pandemic is we are not ready to sustain ourselves in a crisis, whether it's a climate crisis or in this case, the COVID-19 virus crisis. We are not ready. We are very vulnerable to lose our access to food because of this unsustainable food production system that we have come to accept. And we need to really do a quick change around. So we're open. This is a big topic. We're all open to continued conversations with all of you on how we, work with you to develop agricultural justice project labeling and models, but also cooperative development and how we really look at the local economies to begin to build solidarity economies with all of us together. The labor problem is a farming problem. And for us not to be able to have local sustainable farming is a danger to our economic well-being also. So it's important that we work together. Thank you for the time. And I'm open to questions now and whenever. Thank you very much for inviting us.
Great. Let's keep moving and have Ramon share his part, and then we'll go to questions. And if people have questions, if you want to type them into the chat now, while it's at the top of your brain, go ahead.
I'm going to interpret. So, yeah.
Bueno, pues gracias por invitarnos, por dejarnos participar.
Thank you for inviting us and letting us participate.
Pues mi nombre es Ramón Torres. Yo soy un fundador de una cooperativa de trabajadores de campo aquí en Whatcom, en Everson, Washington.
I'm a founder of a worker-owned cooperative in Everson, Washington, in Whatcom County.
Una cooperativa que se fundó, empezamos a empezamos con el proyecto hace 5 años.
We started this project 5 years ago.
Nos quedan 5 años para terminarlo y vamos a mitad del proyecto, ¿verdad?
We have 5 years. We have set a goal and we hope to finalize the project within 5 more years.
Yo creo que como un trabajador del campo, a donde estoy ahorita, ha sido muy difícil.
I think as a farm worker where I am today, it has been very difficult.
Pero es algo que he podido cuando menos educarme de cómo podemos hacer algo diferente y cómo comprometer a la comunidad.
But it's something that I have learned. It's been an education for me to learn on how we can support the community and educate the community and to understand that this is something very different. But but I've learned about it.
Como un trabajador que me levanto en la temporada a las 4 de la mañana y chance llegue a las 5 de la tarde a mi casa, en una vida es bien difícil trabajar para una compañía. Entonces, esta es una alternativa muy buena en la que podemos compartir.
So as a farm worker who has to get up at 4 in the morning and work until 5 or 6 in the afternoon every day, working for another boss or another company, this is an alternative that has been much more satisfactory.
Entonces, yo fui uno de los que me comprometí a trabajar con comunidad
I'm one
para,
of the farm workers that committed himself to work with C2C
para crear estas cooperativas como alternativas para más trabajadores.
to develop more cooperatives as alternatives to more farm workers.
Y una de las cosas con las que estoy de verdad comprometido es por el apoyo que ya nos han brindado antes a hacer lo que podamos, ¿verdad? O lo que queremos.
And one of the reasons I'm committed is because of the support that C2C has given us in the past to follow our leadership so that we can gain victories in ways that we want.
Nosotros empezamos en el 2013 en una compañía en Sakuma Brothers a formar un sindicato de trabajadores.
So we started in 2013 in a company in Skagit to form a Farmworker Union.
En esa campaña de 3 años y medio recibimos bastante información y salimos con la necesidad de formar cooperativas como otro camino después de contratos colectivos.
So during the 3 years of campaigning and forming the union, we received a lot of information and education to understand that one of the things we wanted was farm worker owned co-ops along with collective bargaining agreements, that there was another way besides collective bargaining.
Y algo que nos preocupaba muchísimo y hasta ahorita es todos los pesticidas que pues hasta ahorita las compañías están poniendo, ¿verdad? Para sacar más fruta o más cantidad.
And the big issue that concerns us and still concerns us now is all of the chemicals and pesticides that are being used in many of the companies that were being used then and are still being used now.
Entonces ahorita tenemos la oportunidad de tener una cooperativa con 65 acres de tierra.
So right now we have the opportunity with this to form a cooperative here on the 65 acres of land.
De estas orgánicas y de esta tierra tenemos alrededor de 34 acres sembrados.
So this is organic land. We want organic production. And right now on this land, we have 34 acres planted.
Que era parte del proyecto, ¿verdad? Tener 30 acres sembrados y después de ahí iba el proceso de hacer unas viviendas en las que vamos a tener familias.
And this is part of the project, is to have 30 acres of land for collective production, but then also the rest of the land would be used, part of the rest of the land would be used for housing for the farm worker families that would live on the land.
Parte del compromiso que hicimos es de que tenemos 10 años para formar este proyecto y este proyecto lo queremos que sea retroactivo, ¿verdad?
So what part of the, ¿qué sea qué, Ramón?
Que se vaya simulando que este sea el primer y los trabajadores se comprometan a hacer otro, ¿verdad?
Oh yeah, so part of the 10-year plan that we have is that we would form this worker-owned co-op, but the goal is that from this co-op, it would reproduce itself in creating other co-ops around us.
Entonces, lo que estamos promoviendo es que los trabajadores que quieran ser parte de esta cooperativa no van a tener que poner ni dinero. lo único que se requiere es un patrimonio, ¿verdad? En la que es sudor o parte de trabajo.
So part of our worker cooperative is that when the workers that want to be members of the co-op will not have to pay to be members of the co-op, they will give sweat equity into development of the co-op.
Entonces, quiere decir, el proyecto ya va a ser sostenible, ya va a haber marqueta, ya va a haber fruta, ya va a haber espacios para vivir. Entonces, quiere decir que el proyecto funciona y el único compromiso de los trabajadores es comprar otro pedazo de tierra y hacer lo mismo para otras familias y las otras familias comprometerse a lo mismo, ¿verdad?
So then the commitment is that once we get the co-op is moving forward and workers are producing and they're living on the land, that they have to commit also to eventually buying more land and then establishing other co-ops and other pieces of land.
A otras familias.
Or with other families.
Y la otra familia es que entren a las otras cooperativas, va a ser el mismo compromiso, ¿verdad? Queremos que esto se vaya moviendo.
So all the other families that join the worker-owned co-ops, that they also have to commit themselves to form more worker-owned co-ops. That's how we want this process to be reproducing itself as we move forward and we have success in the sales and the marketing of the products.
Entonces, todo esto es parte del proyecto. Hemos pues tomado esto muy serio y pensamos que es una necesidad, ¿verdad? En que podamos trabajar sin patrones, con buenos sueldos, sin necesidad de preguntarle a alguien si puedo ir a alguna cita.
So we see this as we take this very seriously. It's a very serious commitment that we as farm workers be able to work without bosses, without being looked over, that we make that commitment so that we can set our own time. ¿Qué más dijiste?
No estar pidiendo permisos para citas.
Not to have to ask permission to go to the doctor or anything like that. And he said to set good wages and manage our own time.
Y pues algo bien importante que queremos llegar es no supervisores, ¿verdad? Nadie que nos cuide.
And so one of the things that's key is not to have any supervisors, that we don't need anybody watching us over us all the time.
Pero al mismo tiempo es educar a nuestra propia gente para cómo podemos salir de nomás ser trabajadores como todos nos consideran, ¿verdad?
And the most important thing is to educate our own people how you can leave the idea that you have to work for somebody else and that all that we are is a laborer for somebody else.
Lo único que nos meten en la cabeza es que entre más horas trabajemos, más ganamos y el único beneficio es para estas compañías que pues nos están explotando, ¿verdad? Día con día.
So what we have to live with right now is that in many of our heads, we're thinking that the only way to make money in working for the boss is to work as many hours as possible. And that is an exploitation that's also exhausting us. Every day we have to work harder and harder to make more money. And then all of the profit always goes to the boss and we still haven't earned enough.
Entonces no tenemos ni suficiente para comprarnos una casa.
Many of us do not have enough money to buy our own homes.
Y esa es la preocupación que tenemos. Queremos que nuestras familias tengan ese beneficio de trabajar, tener una casa, compartir sueldos, algo muy diferente a lo que siempre hemos visto.
And this is the vision that we have for our people, that they be able to work, do well, own their own home, and then be able to share with others instead of just being the exploited worker that we have always been. It's another vision.
Entonces, y pues somos trabajadores que no tuvimos acceso a estudio, ¿verdad? Pero somos expertos en lo que es nuestro trabajo, sabemos desde plantar hasta cosechar, entonces es lo que tenemos, ¿verdad?
And we're farm workers. We're workers that never had higher education. We didn't study any of this, but we recognize that we're experts in doing this work, in producing and marketing and selling our own product.
Entonces, pues ahorita estamos trabajando con las cooperativas, con las tiendas orgánicas de aquí locales.
So right now we're working with local outlets that sell organic product.
Community Food Co-op, los de aquí de Bellingham con el Food Bank.
So like the Bellingham Community Food Co-op, the Food Bank.
Y estamos pues listos ya para nuestra tierra la estamos cuidando ya por 4 años, ya estamos listos para empezar el proceso de certificado orgánico y cambiar pues nuestras perspectivas a cómo vamos.
So we've been working this land for 4 years. We're ready to begin our organic certification process. And, we're building our own methods. Y van a trabajar con Elizabeth, ¿verdad?
Sí, ya estamos listos. Ahora que tengo la oportunidad de estar con ella, ¿verdad?
Yeah. So
Para-
one of the projects that we've got going is actually working with the Agricultural Justice Project for that labeling also.
Ujú. Así es de que este año va a haber mucha fruta y también pues parte de nuestro trabajo es seguir promoviendo, ¿verdad? De que aquí en esta cooperativa pues no hay explotación como en varias compañías, ¿verdad?
So we're going to have a lot of product to sell this year, and we're continuing to promote the fact that in this cooperative, there is no exploitation like there is in other companies.
Y nomás para dejarles saber y terminar, gracias a la Unión de Familias Unidas y a Comunidad y a más organizaciones y a los abogados, hoy ya se ganó la ley, ya pasó la ley para que trabajadores de campo tengamos tiempo extra aquí en el estado.
And to close, I just want to say that thanks to Familias Unidas por la Justicia, the union, the Farmworker Union, C2C, and other attorneys and other labor movement organizations, farm workers in Washington state are now eligible to be paid overtime, which is something that should have happened a long time ago. That he didn't say that, I'm saying that. But there was a bill voted on yesterday that passed out of the House, and now it will go to the governor for signature, mandating overtime pay for all farm workers in Washington state.
Entonces,
And that's critical.
gracias a todos.
Thank you, everybody. I just want to say that one of the things that Ramon left out is that in their bylaws, Ramon very specifically asked that within the bylaws be written that farm worker owned co-op members be required to always give a certain number of education hours in teaching other farm workers cooperative development. So actually participating with C2C as trainers in our cooperative development center. So that way we replicate the trainers for other farm workers, which for me was really gratifying to see that in their bylaws. Gracias, Ramon.
Se me olvidó, pues sí, parte de eso es
Yeah.
Toda la educación, ¿verdad? Que tenemos que recibir.
That's great, thank you. So we've had some questions posted in the chat, and I'll start with those. And if other people have questions, go ahead and type them in, and we'll just get through as many as we can. So the first question is, how have the surrounding farming community responded to your co-op? Have they been welcoming or hostile?
¿Quieres contestar, Ramón?
Sí.
¿Entendiste la pregunta?
¿Lo puedes decir en español?
Que cómo han respondido los vecinos de la tierra de la cooperativa, que si te han dado la bienvenida o han sido contras.
Bueno, nos han tratado bien.
We've been treated well.
Varios de los vecinos de aquí hasta han venido a presentarse y nos han abrido pues las puertas de sus casas.
Many of our neighbors came and introduced themselves and opened their doors to their homes.
Porque sabe que tenemos trabajadores migrantes y tenemos, si ocupamos ayuda, ellos están dispuestos a ayudarnos. Entonces, sí hemos recibido buen apoyo por la comunidad aquí en el lado de Everson.
So we've received good support from the community, especially because a lot of the farm workers that come to work at the co-op are undocumented, and so they pledge support if anything, if the workers should need anything, specifically from ICE or any kind of threat of that.
Pero hasta ahorita estamos bien, ¿verdad? Nos han dado una buena bienvenida.
So up to now, it's been good. We've had a good welcoming reception.
Good to hear. Can you tell us a little more about how the land was accessed, saving up to purchase it? How did that happen?
So, ¿quieres saber cómo llegamos a ser dueños de la tierra?
Pues fue bien difícil.
Very
Sí.
difficult.
Todavía estamos en un contrato de compra y venta.
We're still in a lease ownership, lease for ownership. Yeah.
Entonces tenemos 7 años para pagar la cantidad que firmamos en el acuerdo.
So we have 7 years to pay off the full balance in the agreement.
Ahorita parte del acuerdo es pagar cierta cantidad cada año y el 90% se va a la compra, ¿verdad?
So right now we're paying a certain amount every year, and 90% of what we pay goes to the equity of the land.
Los 7 años tienen que estar terminada, pagada. Ese es el trabajo que hacemos con comunidad de cómo recaudar fondos.
So that's the work that we do with community to communities to raise the funding to make sure we get the land paid off in 7 years.
Pero es cuarto año, va a ser cuarta temporada aquí.
So this is our 4th year.
Todavía después de ese tenemos 3 años más para terminar, ¿verdad?
So we've got 3 years to pay it off.
Okay. So this is my own question, but are people able to contribute to that if they want to?
Que si gente puede contribuir a eso si quieren.
Sí, son bienvenidos.
Yes, you're welcome to contribute.
Okay.
Organizaciones, fundaciones.
Yeah,
Well, maybe
we're
we'll
reaching
provide
out to organizations and foundations. So yes.
Great. Maybe we'll just include some info about that in the follow-up.
Okay. All right. I'll send that to you.
Yeah,
Se
great.
lo voy a mandar, Ramón, ¿a dónde deben mandar el dinero?
Sí, por favor.
Okay.
And then next question is, have there been any zoning issues with farming on that land and building housing?
Que
Or
si,
other
que si hemos tenido problemas en la tierra de construir viviendas. I can answer that.
Okay.
When one of the reasons we bought the land and we wanted the land, well, there's 2 reasons. One is there's plenty of water. ¿Hay 3 norias, Ramón, o 2?
Hay 2 que funcionan y una a medias.
There's 3 wells on the land, so we got plenty of water. That was one of the big positives of the land. But the other is that it can be subdivided to build housing on it if we so want. And that was a big fight in Whatcom County, that a lot of those big chunks of land, the zoning was changed so that it could be subdivided. And that's what this land is set that way. But, we have a different perspective on that. So we are able to build housing, but it's not going to be, like what they're going to do with some other land with developers coming in and setting up housing and pristine food producing land.
Right. The next question is, what's the decision-making framework and planning model at the cooperative? Deciding what to plant and who does what and where you sell the product and all that stuff.
So quiere saber cómo hacen decisiones en la cooperativa, decisiones que plantan y cómo venden el producto y qué tanto y todo eso.
Todo eso se hace en los entrenamientos por parte de comunidad.
¿Cómo dijiste?
Que todo eso lo hacemos en los entrenamientos que recibimos por parte de comunidad.
We learned all of these processes through the trainings we received from C2C.
Entonces, cuando en este proceso ahí tuvimos la oportunidad de decidir, vamos a ahorita moras y blueberries y lo dejamos abierto para empezar dragon fruit.
So we have processes to be able to decide what to plant. And so we chose berries, but we also left the option open to plant dragon fruit.
Entonces, ya ahorita tenemos una greenhouse.
So right now we have a greenhouse.
Por terminarla. Y el experimento va a ser dragon fruit.
And the experiment to use the greenhouse for is going to be to grow dragon fruit. ¿Por qué dragon fruit?
Porque así decidimos.
Because that's what we decided.
Es que aquí en el área de Whatcom y pues aquí no hay de esta planta y descubrimos que en una greenhouse podemos mantener el tiempo como se ocupa y hay una buena marqueta para dragon fruit, ¿verdad?
So they found a good market for dragon fruit. In the greenhouse, they can grow it.
That's cool. Okay. next question. Are there ways that Cooperativa Tierra y Libertad adapted the cooperative systems or the cooperative model to meet your needs and goals and reflect your farming traditions and culture?
Que sí, hay maneras que el modelo cooperativo ayudó a ustedes a reflejar la cultura y el modelo de cómo, el trabajo que pueden hacer o que hacen.
Pues yo creo que también fue parte de los entrenamientos de lo que recibimos pues fue una de las razones también por qué decidimos ser orgánicos, ¿verdad?
So I think he said this is part of the training that we received also, which is the biggest reason that we're planting organic.
Entonces es como un ejemplo más o menos.
So this is an example. I think that what I want to add to that is that what farm workers have told us consistently is they want to farm, that they want to work the land, they want to be producing. And many farm workers have told us the almost pain that they feel when they have to do what the boss says they have to do to produce a product. The addition of chemicals, the way that the plants are planted and how they're managed, that farm workers would do it so differently. Also the way the workers are managed, that it's not necessary to have so many supervisors or necessary to use the tools that they're using or the chemicals that they have knowledge of other ways to have the same amount of product being produced and not being given the opportunity. And I think that the cooperative model in the trainings that we receive or that we give, we work with the farm workers on doing it the way that they want and what it's going to take to do that. And the only way really is a worker-owned cooperative model. And I always like to, tell everybody that if you go look at the farm workers working at the co-op, it's a very different scene than a regular farm. Ramon regularly, he has a grill that he fires up and cooks lunch for the workers, throws a bunch of meat on there. And
Cada viernes.
Yeah, every Friday he'll do that, right? And so as the workers are working, he prepares his carne asada, there's always music, there's no supervision. The workers take as many breaks as they want, as long as they want, but the work gets done. The other thing I tell people, which it caught me off guard, right? When I arrived and there was music and Ramon is grilling and he's got like this big cooler full of beer. And I'm like, in my mind, right? It's like boss mind, it's like, what the heck? What's that beer? And then I'm thinking to myself, shut up, Rosalinda. This is their farm, right? But on a Friday, what's the big deal of having some barbacoa tacos and a couple of beers and then everybody goes back to work? I mean, it's what they want to do it and it gets done and they're excellent berries. It's a whole different way for farm workers to work. You just have to go see it. You don't believe it. You have to see it. Even the farm workers are shocked, ¿verdad, Ramon?
Puede ser algo
yeah,
bien diferente de lo que estamos acostumbrados. Entonces también aparte de esto, nos ha dado la oportunidad de también contratar gente, ¿verdad? Aparte de los que tenemos, también se contrata gente para la necesidad de la pizca. Entonces, es bien interesante.
So he said part of the opportunity that the co-op has given us is the ability to hire workers during the harvest. We have to bring other workers, and it's been very interesting about what the workers expect when they get there. Like, and I know Ramon has told me this because it's one of his biggest frustrations is like, they're asking for a supervisor. And it's like, I tell them, you don't need it.
Who's in charge?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Is it accurate to say that it sounds like the cooperative model was just a fit with your traditional way of farming? Is that true?
Sí, yo creo que
like it's natural.
Decir es, sí, yo creo que parte de eso es de cómo nos enseñaron los 7 principios, ¿verdad? Básicos para las cooperativas. Fue algo que nos ayudó más a entender bien lo que era una cooperativa.
Yeah, he says, yes, that's exactly true. But what enhances that is the 7 cooperative models. 7 cooperative principles. Understanding the 7 cooperative principles and how how they actually already fit in their traditions, but putting it in that business model and, you know, using that really worked well.
That's really neat. Thank you. Okay, finding the next question. I have to scroll back up because there was a bunch of stuff typed in. I don't understand this question about.
I think this is a question for me.
Yeah, can you?
It's a question about, I think, how historically the CCC got the money to loan farmers to keep the prices up, because that's how it worked. If the prices in the market weren't high enough, the government loaned the farms money, and they would keep their product off the market until the prices went up again.
Okay.
And there were reserves of grains kept so that if the prices got too high, they would release grain into the market to bring the price down. That money came from the taxpayer, but overall, the parity system actually made some money for the government in interest on the loans that they paid to workers, to the farmers. So the farmers made higher prices because that's what the companies that bought for them had to pay. And the government made some money on the interest on the loans that they made to the farmers in order to keep that system working. It was a whole system that kept the prices up.
Cool.
I wanted to mention to
But I think we'd have to redesign it.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say to Elizabeth, is that in a solidarity economy, that design has to come back and be present in the local solidarity economy. And one of the areas that we're working with, Ramon has sat in with us on several meetings with groups on a national level of establishing our own loan systems for the solidarity economy, which we're calling community to community, the union, the co-ops, and other partners beginning to develop our own like solidarity economy circle that includes developing a funding mechanism for low interest or no interest loans for capital for the co-ops that Ramon is talking about. His vision of developing all these other small co-ops, Ramon and the worker owners know there's going to be capital needed for those small co-ops. And so where is that going to come from? And I think it's exactly what Elizabeth says. It's like people call it, like, what are these loan products, right? Micro loans. But we're talking, we need something much more solid than that. You know, almost like educational credit unions were part of it, but more like our own solidarity economy loaning funds, you know, that are based on the production and the worker-owned co-op model. We're in discussions with Climate Justice Alliance and other groups on developing this national, almost like a bank, right, for helping to grow more farming co-ops on a national level. And I know that this organization of Southern Cooperatives have, you know, the Black farmers have had these banks for themselves also. So there are ways that we need to revisit and recreate capital.
Another mechanism is by having public banks.
Yeah.
So that all of the money from a given area, rather than being held by a bank that is making money off it, can be held, and then the community itself can direct who gets the loans from that public bank.
¿Qué ibas a decir, Ramón?
No más que el dinero, si conseguimos esto como con Lupe, ¿verdad? El dinero se paga con fruta, o si en caso que quiebre, que el dinero, que la granja no funcionó, ellos no piden que pagues el loan, ¿verdad? Vienen y recogen como las partes, si compraste un tractor, si compraste, esa es la facilidad que dan, ¿no?
So, I mean, in the discussions they've had on the loans from Climate Justice Alliance, is that the loan gets paid back in product to community service and in other ways. And if the farm fails, then there's other ways of collecting what was owed.
I just wanted to add that, Rosalinda, you mentioned being inspired by the Mondragon model. And I also went to Mondragon 2 years ago. One of the things that stood out to me was what they do with their Solidarity Fund, Cooperative Development Fund, which with each co-op enterprise contributing percentage every year into the fund. And then when co-ops are doing poorly or have a bad year, instead of having to close down, they're able to get help. And the co-ops that are doing well are paying more into the fund on the good years. And so just wanted to throw that out there. I think that once the mature co-op system is developed, then that opportunity materializes.
All of these mechanisms, I think, you know, Elizabeth and I know Ramon, we think we can do this locally if we have the will and the ability to work together to figure these things out at the local level, because nobody's going to do it for us. I mean, that's clear.
Yeah,
we have to do it ourselves. And I think that's what the farm workers have told me. It's like, and I agree, you know, if we don't do it ourselves, it's not going to happen.
Yeah,
it's not.
Yeah, and that's the thing about being dependent on the government or nonprofit, you know, community, which serve important roles, but the co-ops are about, you know, that self-help and empowerment. And,
right.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. How many families want to be supported by the cooperative, and what is your vision for making that possible? I think you mentioned four families.
Estamos pensando 4 viviendas para 4 familias y la cooperativa se va a dividir en ejidos. Entonces, cada familia va a tener un ejido. Parte del ejido es un pedazo de terreno en el que ellos puedan ser dueños junto con la casa, ¿verdad?
So they're looking to build housing for 4 families, and each family will have their home, but also a couple of acres. They're in ejido, which is like their own little piece of land that goes with the house for their own production. Pero luego también va a haber tierra de producción colectiva, ¿verdad?
Va a ser 30 acres de producción en la que las 4 familias vamos a estar haciendo el trabajo, que dependiendo los de cómo vamos a distribuirlo, qué le toca a cada quien, ¿verdad?
So there's going to be like 30 acres of communal collective farming where all the 4 families will work together to make, you know, bring in income and divide that income between the families. But they're each going to have their own little piece of land with their home to do whatever they want on that.
Great. Okay, so we're getting short on time, so let's try to get through a couple more questions. Is the co-op model, the members/workers sustainable? Oh, does the co-op provide sustainable full-time work and income? Does it fully support the worker owners?
A ver, en español, ¿qué dijo?
Que si este modelo ahorita está sosteniendo a ustedes, los miembros, económicamente, si están ganando suficiente para eso.
Los fundadores no tenemos todavía sueldo.
The founders do not have wages yet.
Estamos pagando $15 para la gente que viene a ayudarnos por hora.
We're paying $15 an hour to the workers that we hire for the harvest.
Mientras todavía los fundadores estamos poniendo nuestro patrimonio, ¿verdad? Este año pasado ya nos fue bien. Pensamos que este año ya nos va a ir mucho mejor, pero.
So he says that the founders are still working on sweat equity, but that this year they're looking that this year is going to be better. They're going to be able to earn something, to get something paid.
Después de 5 años.
After 5 years.
Okay.
Sweat equity.
Can you talk for a minute about the other sorts of cooperatives that will be part of your system, like production, processing, co-ops, transport, anything like that?
¿Qué otras clases de cooperativas esperamos ver como
Bueno,
parte del sistema?
Parte de nuestra visión es formar otra cooperativa de tortillas.
So part of our vision is to have a tortilla cooperative.
Entonces, la otra es una granja específica que pueda crecer elotes para esa para esa tortillería.
And then the other farming co-op would be the farming co-op that would grow the corn to make the tortillas.
Entonces, queremos hacerlo en canita, queremos que sea orgánico también, pero
We want the tortilla to be an organic tortilla, so organic corn.
entonces ahorita lo que sigue después de esto sería al mismo paso seguir haciendo más alternativas como la tortillería.
So I think that's our first step. After that, it would be whatever the workers decide and what the alternatives are needed, what alternatives are needed in the community. Like right now, you can't find local organic tortillas grown with local corn.
Pues yo pienso que no puedes encontrar hecha por trabajadores, ¿verdad? Que venga desde el principio hasta el fin hecha la tortilla, que va a ser lo interesante.
So you definitely don't find a worker-owned product process where that's worker-owned from seed all the way to the packaging of the tortilla itself.
Right. So in the last, just a few more minutes for questions, I wanted to ask a couple questions that we had thought of before regarding the food justice label, food justice certification. So this is for Elizabeth or anybody can answer, but like what's the cost if a farm wanted to explore getting the food justice certification? What's involved in that? How do they start, and why should they want to do it?
Well, first of all, most farms need some technical assistance to get started with food justice certification because they may not have written labor policies, they may not have a conflict resolution process, they may not really be up to what's legal in terms of their labor policies. So on the Agricultural Justice Project website, we have a big farmer toolkit that you can access, which has all the materials that you would need to come into compliance. And the Agricultural Justice Project, in addition to running the certification, provides this technical assistance. And the certification itself is actually done by the Ohio Ecological Food and Farming Association. But the board of AJP has been raising money so that we can subsidize the cost of the certification. Because humane animal treatment certification is available for free. It's been possible for Animal Welfare Approved to raise enough money to give that certification for free. So we think it should be possible to raise enough money to make human treatment free as well. So we're working on that. At the moment, we actually have a very generous grant from the National Cooperative Grocers to cover the full cost of certification for a farm like Tierra y Libertad. So we're hoping that that will cover, any technical assistance that the co-op needs, and then the full cost of certification can come from that grant. And hopefully, people will be generous enough so that we can do this certification for free for farms that are run by white farmers as well. That's
great. Thank you.
That's our image, our vision. We're working on it.
So, Lerner, I was going to say that why couldn't a group of us in Whatcom or Skagit get together and start developing the funding for more certification on small local farms in our area? Because if you have an AJP certification on a small farm, there is no question that the workers on that farm are being treated well. That's, to us, that's you either have a union contract or you have the AJP label. And then when people ask us, can you name a farm where the workers are being treated well? If you got the AJP label, that's it. Right now, we can't say, we can't say, name a farm, because we don't know, because we get complaints from workers all the time.
Yeah.
And without knowing the workers, we don't know.
The two first farms to be certified AJP are in California, and one is Jim Cochran's Swanton Berry Farm, which is both unionized under the United Farm Workers and certified by AJP. Because for Jim, making that statement to the world and treating his workers with
Yep.
respect and paying them decently is his life's work, as well as growing organic strawberries. And Pie Ranch did a really interesting experiment this year. They have a store where they sell their produce, and they invited their customers to pay a voluntary 2.5% tax on every purchase. And that money was to go to cover the cost of their certification. And they actually got enough people to pay that voluntary tax to cover the cost.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's really, really exciting. So this is going to have to be a community effort to make this work.
That's really great, and I think a good spot to start closing it out. It's 3:28. I just wanted to say that we're also working on solidarity economy organizing out here in San Juan County, and you know, I've had a lot of people ask, you know, how to sort of get involved, or a lot of people who live out here in the San Juan Islands don't leave the islands very much. So it's like, how can we be involved over in Whatcom County? My feeling is, just from getting to know you and sort of doing this work together, is that we can support, and one way to support is to do solidarity economy organizing in our own communities, because it's not enough to just have it in one region or one community. We have to have solidarity economy, and that mindset and those relationships need to change where we are. And then we can have, you know, solidarity with each other, with other communities and nationally, and it's a global movement. And so I just wanted to say that, and I, you know, invite anybody to, you know, plug in, contact me if you want to plug in with the solidarity economy organizing in the San Juan Islands. And I look forward to continuing to working with C2C and Ramon and all of you over there, because I think we can learn a lot just from each other and sharing resources and ideas. So.
Y tenemos 10 acres de mora también ahí, por si quieren que vendamos mora para la isla.
Mora is raspberry?
Sí.
So he says, well, we have 10 acres of raspberries if you want to sell raspberries in the island.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I want to talk to you guys about that. Really, yeah, looking forward to
All right.
trying to figure out how to do that. And yeah, and also, so there's a survey, a couple things to close. There's a survey in the chat, if you wouldn't mind, before you leave, clicking on that. And if you click on it now, then it'll open. And that way, when the meeting closes, it'll still be there in your browser. And we appreciate the feedback. Yeah, and we'll send out follow-up resources. And there's also a resource link in the chat as well. And so, yeah, be the change.
It's possible, totally possible, if you all do it together. Thank you for having us with this presentation, Learner. Thank you, everybody that participated.
Thank
Feel
you.
free to ask us any questions. Yeah, if you want to contact me, go to foodjustice.org. There's an email address there too that you can email.
Great. Yeah,
Bye.
thank you so much,
working with
Rosalinda.
you,
Thank you, Ramon. Thank you,
Linda.
Elizabeth.
Yeah, thank you.
It's wonderful.
Thank you.